what would be your advice to someone he's like his first or second company, but doesn't have like a big track record?
Yeah, similarly, I think mentally thinking of it think of pitch for partners, not for funds, right? So nowadays with LinkedIn and every, fund website has like a lot more content on it than it did 10 years ago. If you are a marketplace business, find the marketplace expert at that fund, right? And pitch that person. And if you are building an AI roll up for, an antiquated industry, like go look at the people who are putting money into that type of business and work backwards from there. And don't be afraid to get no's, because I'll tell you right now, we've raised over $100 million for Ghost. My Series A had a uh, spreadsheet with 67 no's on it. Like full pitch, no thank you, not interested. And it's just the nature of the game.
You're listening to 0 to 1, the podcast where future unicorns get a start. Every week, we sit down with the founders actually building, the ones turning scrappy ideas into real-world companies. No fluff, no cliches, just raw insights, hard lessons, and the playbooks that VCs and top operators don't share publicly. We're your hosts, Jonathan, Matteo, and Gary. Three friends obsessed with turning 0 into 1. Ready to build something legendary? Let's dive in.
On this episode of 0 to 1, we are talking with Josh Kaplan, founder and co-CEO of Ghost, one of LA's fastest growing startups, transforming how brands manage excess inventory through real-time data and intelligent systems. Before Ghost, Josh built fashion brands like New Republic, worked at the intersection of tech and culture, and launched Percla, a student discount platform that was acquired. He has worn a lot of hats, and today we dive into how that journey led him to build one of LA's most innovative companies. Hey Josh, how is it going?
It's great to be here, and thank you for that. Yeah, I'm so excited to speak with you guys. Honestly, I'm a little wet. I'm in New York right now. It's raining. I'm not used to this. I'm from Los Angeles, where Ghost is headquartered, but other than that, good to go.
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. So first, can you maybe introduce yourself for our audience?
Yes, of course. I think you did a great job of it. But yeah, Josh Kaplan, founder and co-CEO of Ghost. So Ghost is a 4-year-old company now, which is crazy to say. Feels like we just started it yesterday, but we are powering the world's inventory trade. So it's a B2B marketplace that buyers and sellers can trade inventory with one another across our platform and use data insights to power those decisions. And my background's been primarily in product management. So 15 or so years. My first PM job was at a media company called Variety in Los Angeles, and helped transform the way that breaking news and journalism in general was moved from physical to digital for this company. And it was a really exciting and really interesting experience for me that helped me realize that I wanted to spend most of my career transforming antiquated industries for the digital age.
Very interesting. But just to get back to on your early days, I know you did something very unique in the US. Like you got, I think, one bachelor and you did a master after that, and following that you did your MBA. So I was just curious, to understand, why did you do so much schooling and what did you get out of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I ask myself that often. Uh, Genuinely, the real answer is I have a bit of a scholastic brain. So the best way for me to learn is through like a traditional academic experience, which is fairly rare for entrepreneurs. But honestly, it's been so exciting for me to have the opportunity to get great educations at different universities here in the US. And uh, I'm always learning. I have aspirations of getting my PhD later on in life, and uh, it's just something that works for me. And it's hard to say that it works for everyone, but for me, it's really been something that's changed my career for the better.
Okay, very interesting. So after your studies, you quite quickly, like, after a few experience, went into entrepreneurship. So I'm interested in understanding basically what sparked like your journey to entrepreneurship and what was your first venture?
Yes. So um, I love to build things. At the end of the day, I think that's what keeps me coming back. And I joke with my co-founder of this company, Ghost, that let's say we have an extraordinary outcome and uh, go public or get acquired, and my chapter with Ghost is over. I'm gonna have to start another company. There's just no way around it because it's in my blood, and I think that really it was something from when I was younger. I mean, I started a clothing line when I was in high school. I started a arbitrage business when I was in grade school. It's just something that's always been part of my interests. And I think as I grew older and started to learn about technology, I always found that um, that was the most blue sky left for me, being able to transform and build companies that were really transforming the way that humans were interacting with each other through technology.
Okay, so what was your first company doing?
So Perkla was a digital platform for student discounts. So marketplace, two-sided marketplace where we onboarded universities that were then helping us onboard all of their students, and we would onboard brands that would list their discounts that were exclusively available to the students that were uh, approved through our partner universities. And so we scaled that business. Honestly, it's more of a B2B marketplace than anything else, which has now helped me evolve my experience into running a B2B marketplace now here with Ghost. But it was really interesting. The the genesis of Perkla was one of those light bulb moments as young MBA students at Columbia, myself and two of my co-founders, Justin and Mark. Uh, we had a gap between undergrad and graduate school, and so in that gap, e-commerce exploded. And we got back to graduate school. We were putting on backpacks for the first time in a while, and we felt like students again. So we had student IDs. And I remember vividly that, back when I was in university, you would walk into a store, show your student ID, and you would get a discount. There was no way to do that online. And so it was that simple insight that really catalyzed the uh, building of Perkla. And it's so funny now in hindsight, and this has happened to me multiple times over the years where I talk about something that was so novel and innovative at the time. But of course, you guys are probably sitting around the table going like, duh, of course, student discounts should be available online. Like, why wouldn't they be? Um, and uh, it, it's funny to think about the speed at which this technology is moving.
So at Berkeley, you built like retail partnerships. How did you earn media coverage at first and get like a first billboard? Because like I think what's the name of the company to publish billboards in Times Square?
Yeah, so we were on a billboard in Times Square through a partnership that we had done with Express, which was a fashion brand, still around, but a fashion company at the time. It was one of our larger partners, and um, it's this really interesting dynamic that you play as a consumer, as a B2B business and a consumer facing business. Press has like very different implications, right? Oftentimes you can argue that there's no such thing as bad press, right? So what you want is you want people talking about your company. You want this groundswell of conversation so that prospective investors, prospective customers, prospective employees are all reading about it going, wow, I want to learn more. And for Perkla, it was very much intended for all the above, right? So if we could create a very large, battle cry that we were the ones that were, seeking universities to help create value for their students, seeking brands to help create value for their marketing teams. It sounds so silly because it is a B2B business, but like art was a sexy business. If you think about the brands that we were working with and the interface and just all of that, um, we wanted our press to feel the same way. And so we ended up just doing this really great, uh, advertorial essentially with Express, with GQ that made it onto Times Square's billboards and created a ton of value for us. But honestly, it's just one of those, it's really hard to create lightning in a bottle like that. It was really more of just us being out in the market, kind of sharing what we were doing and why.
But like that was in 2012, I think, right? When you got into billboard.
Yes, that's correct.
What was the like 12 years ago was very different. Like growth was very different from today. I mean, there was LinkedIn DMs was very new. Like it was only the beginning. Like, how did you get your first partners and clients to, as a student, as a Columbia student, to just like get into a billboard? That got you started. What was the first light that sparkled?
So one of the really novel things that I realized while I was at Columbia, and I've actually spoken about this at the business school a few times. When you're a student, there is such a different lens that professionals look at cold or warm emails to versus if you are just, let's say, a young entrepreneur pitching them on a prospective business, right? So we really used that to our advantage, right? We were Columbia students that were very interested in talking with the chief strategy officer at the Gap, right? And the lens was partially we want to learn what it's like to be you in this role, and partially that we are building a business that can hopefully create enormous value for you. And the hit rate, or like the return rate of emails coming from students from a .edu email address, you know, really asking just like mutually beneficial questions was so much higher than being, let's say, just a young professional trying to launch a business. And yeah, maybe today it's probably harder because there's just so many more touch points that we have now online. Like you mentioned, it's not just email, it's DMs across 5 different platforms. It's it's people are hitting me up on my phone and WhatsApp and iMessage, all day, every day that I don't have a personal relationship with. I'm getting thousands of messages and this is a growth stage company. Like we're not even that well known, and I'm getting thousands of cold messages a day. And so the open rate of those near zero, the return rate of those is near zero. So it is harder today, I'd say, than it was for us at the time. But that was a strategy that worked for us. And to be honest, even with you guys right here, like why do this podcast versus the dozens and dozens of others that, requested? It's because there's something about being students. Mateo's first email to me that you get this like pay it forward mentality because, and I've seen generally it's I like to think of it as like there's nothing, some of it might be selfish. It's like you guys are going to be the entrepreneurs of tomorrow and it'd be good to have a good relationship with you guys. But part of it's also just there were really great mentor type people that gave me a chance when I was 24, 26 years old that now I want to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And you just persuaded me to keep my Columbia EDU address for the next. But just to finish up, or to wrap up on your early days, I saw you also worked in fashion. It's very interesting, and it's very, very rare also. So what drew you into this field, and what surprised you about this change?
Yeah, being a technologist in the fashion industry does feel like an oxymoron. And I think that was part of my competitive advantage is it's one of the last frontier industries that values the traditional way so much that it becomes almost a barrier to technology adoption. And, um, fashion as a word is obviously like such a large and complex term, like fashion and retail, where I've had specific experiences, partially in the early stage, direct to consumer, Shopify style growth uh, business. I've also had experience working with and consulting with very large enterprise retailers and everything in between. And what that's really allowed me to do is narrow down the problem areas that are plaguing most of these large and small brands and retailers worldwide, and then leverage my team and my expertise to solve those problems. And that's really where Ghost comes into play, is being able to solve some of the hardest problems of the folks in our industry, large and small, because it's really hard. It's really hard to change behavior. And so that's really at its core why I think that we're winning, is because we deeply empathize with our customers and we're solving problems for them.
Okay, very nice. So maybe for our listener who don't know Ghost yet, can you introduce us what you're doing with Ghost, and also what was like when did you decide basically to start building this company?
Yeah, so my last business before Coast was with my co-founder, D. Murphy, and we were running an incubator for fashion brands. And so, as Matteo had mentioned, we launched a brand called New Republic, a brand called Melrose Place, Grand Running Club, and a number of others. And we had a very simple thesis that was quite complex to execute, which was that if we could run really intelligent experiments and rapid experimentation across different channels, let's say like programmatic advertising or native social media, could we learn about could we test different types of products and brands before we launch them? And that was a great business that we were able to scale. And then, COVID hits in 2020, and suddenly our supply chain basically disappears overnight, right? You don't have access to China. You don't have access to many of the Asian countries where we're producing products. We had very little insight into how we could work with our teams in Mexico and Canada. Even US-based factories were shut down, for months on end. And so two big insights came out of that. The first was that we pivoted to essentially a multi-brand retailer where we were sourcing products domestically and then selling them on our website, because we needed to fill up our digital shelves with something, right? So we were sourcing brands that people recognize, the Levi's and Vans type brands of the world. And it was so hard to source new inventory from brands large and small. And then the second insight was that our inventory that we had already purchased that was stuck right overseas, by the time it arrived, we had already sold our customers other things, or we sold them things from different seasons. And so we had this enormous excess inventory problem. And so those two insights really became the foundation for why Ghost was built. So that's exactly what Ghost solves today. We are a business that has digitized the inventory sourcing and sales ecosystem. And we primarily focus on two subsets, which is surplus inventory and wholesale. And so the surplus inventory is traditionally excess. So it could be that brand has made too much of it. It could be products from another season. It could be, traditional like liquidation type products that are damage, returns, etc. And then our wholesale business is helping expand brands into new regions or to new retailers or into new categories. So, you may have a large growing domestic business. How do you think about expanding into China? How do you think about expanding into Europe? How do you think about expanding into enterprise retail as a direct-to-consumer business? And so that's really where Ghost plays, and that's really what we're solving for. And I'll emphasize again, all of this is built on a foundation of data. And so at our core, we are a data business, right? We are learning from first party information, from third party data. We have dozens of APIs that we're using to extract, raw marketplace data from partners like StockX and whatnot. And we're using all that to power decision making for us and our customers.
Okay, very interesting. So basically, if we try to synthesize or summarize what you're doing is with so your company, it's basically that you're helping like retailers with or brands with excess inventory to connect with retailers. That's right, through a marketplace. So that was the original idea. And how did you start building it? Basically, how did you build your first MVP out of it?
Yeah. So every marketplace has what's called a cold start problem, right? Which is,
Exactly.
do you acquire the supply? Do you acquire the demand? You need the demand to acquire the supply. You need the supply to acquire the demand. And I'll never forget, this was probably in an undergraduate course that I had taken. But I remember it was one of the advertising executives at Verizon, the telecom company. And it was a fireside chat, and he's talking about just he had left and started this ad tech platform. And so he's now an ad tech entrepreneur, and he's talking about how he got his start. And one of the really funny things that he had shared was that he went to his former employer Verizon and said, well, we're talking with AT&T. He goes to AT&T and says, yeah, we're talking with Verizon. And he kind of pinned them up against each other. And eventually they're both like, all right, well, we have to be the one that's using this platform so that they aren't, right? And so I originally thought that would be the way that we would acquire customers on Ghost. And it turns out the fashion industry is very small. And so what we learned really early on was that almost everybody knows each other because people move around, right? From company to company, retailer to retailer, brands go to retailers or vice versa. And so what we ended up, how we ended up solving that cold start problem was actually that we would onboard both sides for free and give the implication under the implication that like if you list your inventory, what we will do is then share with you offers from retailers. And if you like them, then you work with us, right? And if not, then no harm, no foul. We don't have to work together. And then conversely, would go to retailers and resellers, and we would say, tell us what you're looking for. We can go and source it for you, right? And we did that for a long time, for probably the first year of the business. I remember I built the first prototype product, me and one other person on our early team. And we were basically just manually uploading every single person's inventory into this prototype. And they were manually uploading every single retailer's wish lists. And then we were just manually matching them and then emailing both sides. Like, here are the offers that you're getting as a seller. And then here's the inventory that you're looking for as a buyer. And what's so funny is now I think, those early days are, you look back and you think, there's just so much that can go wrong with a human that deeply involved in the transaction. And the optimistic side of me thinks we learned so much about how this industry operates by doing it that way. And so now we've been able to build an enormous amount of software that solves the most important pain points versus moving the other way around, right? Building basically a two-sided marketplace, which that infrastructure is fairly common, right? You can picture just infinite versions of a two-sided marketplace that you've used before, where that's not complicated for you to build by itself. We took the other approach, and I actually think that it's attributed very greatly to our success because we've spent a lot of our time building less of the things that are unnecessary for our industry and more of the things that are directly related to it.
Okay. And do you believe that it would have been a different story if you had started this company after ChatGPT and with like both building like the tool with vibe coding, but also automating some repetitive task with AI?
There are no absolutes here, right? So I think that there will be successful startups that start as vibe coding projects, same way that there's been incredible companies that started as school assignments, right? One of the best things about vibe coding is the ability to rapidly prototype, which I do think is always been a barrier to entry for many non-technical founders over the years. And I remember doing wireframing 20 years ago, probably with a program called Balsamic that basically is the equivalent of stick figures in today's environment. And so it's so hard for it's the technology is just moving so fast that where I see the value in using the AI tools that are available to everyone is being able to get closer and closer to a familiar experience to get your research, to get your feedback, right? A familiar experience of, all right, I now see what an analytics dashboard looks like, and I can visualize it there. And I can very easily create an onboarding flow, and I can very easily add in a messaging component, right? Because all of these components are there and available to you. So I do think that that part makes it very easy. And I actually think at the same time, everyone now has access to those. So the bar of differentiation is higher, right? 20 years ago, you could probably build a pretty simple messaging feature and be one of the few companies that have the infrastructure to do that. But now you're competing with everyone that has access to, any of these AI tools. So I don't think that this changes the alpha for entrepreneurs. I think that it changes mostly the speed at which you get to a point of POC.
But your product integrates so much different components that it will be extremely hard for like an AI tool like Lovable or vibe coding to create and build a prototype. But my question on this is, how did you decide what to prioritize first among all the subcomponents within your platform that you created? And why did you think building a one-stop shop aspect to your platform was the right thing to do versus only specializing in, for example, mastering the logistic aspect and then moving on to different other components?
Yeah, so I think, and again, there's no absolutes. I'm sure there's many. I'm sure there's many great businesses that can be built, using many of these tools, and I'm sure there's a ton of enterprise value that we haven't even extracted yet, as far as the maturity of these tools goes. But for something as complex as our industry, using simple AI tools or to create, let's say, an MVP, on the surface, it can look like it has all the features that you need to solve a problem. But as you start to dig underneath, there's a ton of complexity that's very difficult to solve with simple prompts. And so one very specific example for our business is something we call itemization. So itemization is a process that we have created here. It is a proprietary process that we've developed here at Ghost that essentially converts the raw crude oil that is the retail product data from thousands of different retailers and brands and methylates it into the gasoline that is the fuel that powers our marketplace. And so if you think about, every retailer has different SKU taxonomies, they have different data variables, and they have all this information that is typically unstructured, right? It's lives somewhere in an ERP system or an IMS, and all of them are very different. So one company says small, another says SM, another says S, another says petite, right? But all of those mean the same thing. And so what we do is leverage both our proprietary tooling that we've built, and then we also use LLMs from many of the AI tools that I'm sure you guys are using as well, to convert all of that raw unstructured data into standardized SKU taxonomies. And it requires context, it requires QA, it requires industry knowledge to understand. Like the size is the easy one, but when you think of all the intrinsic and extrinsic variables that go into a product, like being able to show that like this is a white t-shirt that can also, as you start to think about like shopping behavior, so is this a shirt for social events? Is this a shirt for men in urban areas? Is this a shirt for certain seasons, right? You start to add all these variables. It's very difficult for you, traditionally that's done by humans, right? It's done by merchandisers. And so even that, we have spent an enormous amount of time being able to take what used to be for a very large, complex, think like tens of thousands of individual SKUs, that might take us weeks to itemize that list into a standardized format and to create different listings from it. From weeks, we've moved to days, moved to hours, and now we're in the process of trying to move that from hours to minutes. And so it just shows having that level of context and then that level of commitment to solving that acute problem for our industry. That's just one of dozens of examples of things that we work on here at Ghost to create what ends up being a very seamless experience for the customer, which is I upload my inventory and it is incredibly complex and incredibly disorganized. And then hours later, I now have a very structured list of inventory with market pricing and industry data, and it is organized in ways that are most highly probable to sell to different channels. And so that's really the goal of some of the tools that we're building.
What models do you use, like LMs, open source or OpenAI? Just
we test a lot. So we do have a head of ML that is orchestrating a number of different experiments across different tools that we use. But fear of sharing too much of, I should say fear of just referencing folks that I don't have personal relationships with. A lot of folks will use the GPT models, and but at our company, at any day, you'll see Anthropic and you'll see Perplexity, and we have our own models that we've built as well. And it's rapidly changing. And so I think in the short term, what many companies of our size are doing is using different models across the same systems to see what different answers and results you're getting, and then tweaking it over time.
Yeah. Just getting back to now this business side, what was your framework for solving the chicken and egg problem and maintaining liquidity in the marketplace? So what was your answer to that?
Yeah, so what we did was we over-serviced both sides to create a very intimate enterprise style relationship with every customer, even the small ones. And so we basically became the personal shopper for every buyer and the personal salesperson for every seller. And what that allowed us to do is basically start to match. And now we algorithmically match years later, but at the time, it is basically looking at a list of that we generated in a product like Retool, if you're familiar, where you can list all of the wish list items and organize them by volume. And so, all right, everybody this week is looking for Nike. We go to Nike and say we have 77 different buyers that are actively interested in purchasing Nike products right now at this price point and in this location. So, the answer is very manual, over servicing and then replacing those manual processes with software over time.
And there is also the privacy component into at that within the platform. Where does this concept of hiding, for example, the seller identity come from? Because I've never encountered this before in any marketplace I navigated so far.
Yeah, Mateo, thank you for bringing that up. It's a huge part of our business. Privacy, trust, and safety are, if data is the lifeblood of this business, privacy, trust, and safety is the foundation of which we are able to operate. It is so important. It's why we're called Ghost, even, right? We're Ghost because we want to operate in the background. We want our customers to operate like a ghost, being able to offload their excess in a place that's discreet, or being able to purchase new products in a place that's private. And so the reason why privacy is so important in this industry is because the consumer perception of retail and of brands is quite different than the internal workings of the brand retailer relationship. Even as simple as the wholesale pricing, right? A pair of jeans to a consumer that are $300, even though we know it inherently, if you see it listed for $150 for a business to buy, it changes your price perception of that brand, right? But that's typical wholesale pricing for many of these products is 50% off of MSRP. And then you start to think about cost, right? Cost could be as low as 5 to 10% of MSRP. The manufacturing cost. And so what ends up happening is it's very difficult to explain in an article or a split-second advertisement why the $1,000 pair of shoes actually only cost €60 to make, right? And so what ends up happening is you see these sensationalized articles that come out about brands where, oh my gosh, I cannot believe they're selling this product for so much more than it costs. The reality is, almost everything in our life as a consumer that we purchase is a high margin. And you start to just add all the unit economics from, beyond COGS, the marketing expense and the retail stores and all of the things that go around the sales effort of being able to create this emotional response that you have with the brand that results in you spending $1,000 for the pair of shoes, right? And so when you take the incremental cost of a product out of context, it changes the consumer perception. And so that's why to create a B2B marketplace, the only way to do it is for it to be incredibly protected so that consumers cannot just log into Ghost and see that these products are available at costs drastically different than the end consumer gets.
Okay. When building a marketplace, there's many metrics that you need, KPIs you need to track. What would be, let's say, the top 5 in your metrics to track to product market fit?
Yeah, so North Star for us is shipped GMV. So that's the total number of that's the total volume of orders that are shipped to our buyers from our sellers, right? And from that, we have a traditional take rate model. The take rate is just think of it as transaction fees. So the more that is shipped to our buyers, the more revenue that we make. So that's definitely a metric that guides many of our decisions. Beyond that, the next big one is really buyer retention and seller retention, but they're slightly different metrics for us, right? Buyer retention, we want to see buyers spending more money with us over time and consistently over time. Sellers is quite unique because, and I used to say this more jokingly, but if it's an excess inventory seller, we don't want them selling more and more with us over time because they're likely going out of business, right? So instead, what we want to do is we want to create a very healthy hygiene of seller relationships, but ultimately what we care about is brand retention. So we want to ensure that Nike products, even if it's not coming from Nike directly, if it's coming from a retailer or their distributor or from a wholesaler, we want to see more and more of that brand acquired and more of that brand sold. So we also look at many of our clickstream metrics to understand just full funnel data on where buyers and sellers are clicking through, what they're spending time on the listing page, where they're dropping off. And so that's helping us guide decisions that we make on the landing page, on the we don't have a traditional add to cart because these are large, complicated B2B transactions, right? There's a whole flow to create an order. And so being able to track where someone, let's say, leaves a draft order and doesn't come back is very important to us. And then the last metric I think that's very important is the match quality. And so that's a proxy for our algorithmic decisions, how accurate they are, right? So match quality is essentially just a fraction of the number of matches, number of effective orders over the number of matches.
Okay. And how accurate is that, the matching part?
I don't know the numbers offhand because we do it by category, but I'd say we're improving tremendously, and we will continue to.
Are you asking like users and sellers, like, was it a good match? Was this kind of good client, like rate out of 10, or that's like the...
So part of it's easy to track and part of it's quite difficult. So for example, in the listing page, you have the ability to thumbs up or X any particular listing. And so a thumbs up indicates you save it and it goes now into a saved wish list. And so you can proxy some of that data to go, all right, so that's a high quality match. And then you want to follow through and make sure does that end up actually being purchased. When you cross it out, there's a prompt modal that shows, a question of why did you X this out? So is it price was too high? Is it the product's not in the right location? Is it, other variables that help inform our match quality? Having said that, so we're tracking all of these like individual moments. The challenge is also oftentimes a deal ends up falling through independent of the match, right? So the seller ends up recounting the goods and realizing they have far less than they thought they did. Or the buyer ends up finding a different product that is equally or better as great. And so they end up making a purchase, even if they were very interested in the original products. And so there's always a bit of variability here. And so for us, where we're really trying to focus is getting as much context as possible and then doing our best to, really create a forum where buyer and seller have the highest probability of converting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this seems like very complex. And for our like listeners, do you have any advice for them on how to, really like learn how to solve those problems? And lastly, how do you see the role of AI playing, in such an environment?
Yeah, so I have a whiteboard in my office that I always write at the very top of it, something that never gets erased until I replace it with another phrase. And for a long time, the phrase was complicated is the moat. And that was something that really drove the DNA of our business, right? Can we lean into the fact that there are so many complicated processes that we're solving for and so many variables that go into the decision-making process and so many things that can go wrong, right? We're shipping millions of units of products around the world without touching them. It's a very complex problem to solve. And more recently, after our Series C, fundraise last year, I replaced that phrase with what got you here won't get you there. And I think that's advice that's very important for someone just starting out, is also knowing that being a 0 to 1 company is very different than 1 to 10. And we are in the process now of evolving and maturing as an organization to this next chapter. And I look back and think, if I were doing any of the things that I'm doing today 3 years ago, it would be almost impossible for me to launch this business off the ground. And so the advice is actually not to get caught up in the infinite ways where you can optimize, but instead be incredibly simplistic about the value that you're creating and focus purely on that. And I think product market fit as a term has been bastardized a bit over the past 5 to 10 years because, folks basically essentially treat a certain revenue growth and retention as product market fit, right? You must have product market fit because people keep coming back and spending more money with you. And the reality is that you can have different versions of fit that result in that. And so I don't even think that you need true product market fit in the early days because you don't need a true, it depends on, of course, the business. Like it appears that Cursor has true product market fit as one of the earliest companies to have it that I've ever seen, right? Linear is a great example of a company that has true product market fit. But there's many great companies that can get off the ground with having what I affectionately call service market fit, right? Can you solve a problem for your customer? And because of that, they keep coming back. I think you have to start there. And what that does is it also empowers you to understand what it is about your business or your product that your customer is actually most interested in. That's when you build better tools and better processes and better products to support that.
Okay, that's very, very interesting view. And what mistakes or pitfall like did you do maybe when going from 0 to 1 that if you started again, you would avoid it? And maybe the same question also for the latest stage.
Yeah, how much time do you have, right? Yeah, we made a lot of mistakes, and I think that's part of the early stage process. Is it's better. There was one of our investors used to say, "I'd rather get a speeding ticket than a parking ticket," and I think that's really great cultural advice to share. Is like make mistakes because you're moving fast versus making the mistake of not moving fast enough. And so in the early days, we really tried to expand as fast as possible. And you can look back and say, maybe there were categories that we entered that we didn't need to, like electronics and furniture, or beauty products that are so much more complex than we originally thought they would, or there's certain features that we built for different customer segments that ended up we thought would be a huge part of our revenue that end up being a much smaller part. And so you end up deprecating those features and replacing them with different tools. And I think the other big one that people rarely talk about is people, right? It's really hard to find incredible talent for an early stage company and retain them. And it's also incredibly challenging to hire a really strong 0 to 1 person and expect them to make the transition instead of 1 to 10, right? It's a completely different skill set. And there are many that do. And those people, what I like to look for as a hiring manager is I try to look for really strong transferable skills, really strong like autonomy, because we're a small business, so they're not going to be micromanaged, and the willingness and ability and proven track record of evolution, right? Of, well, this person did this at this caliber, and then they moved to this, and then they moved to that. And so I know it almost seems counterintuitive, but I actually look for people that have like really strong contact switching in their resume. Not like 1 year here, 1 year here, 1 year here, but they scaled with one company in the transportation space, think like an Uber, Lyft type business, and then they scaled a programmatic advertising business, or then they went to a company like Tinder, and you start to just see like if you can do well in different environments, it shows that you are adaptable. And then I guess to answer a question about the later stage, just really quickly, we went from being an RC car, right? So low speed, but super nimble, and can move really, really fast, turn on a dime, to becoming like a Ford Mustang, where now it's like you're driving really fast and you could still make those turns, but you don't really have like the same you can't really hold a huge load of data or capital or infrastructure, and we're kind of moving into this next stage where we're not quite the 18 wheeler that has enormous power and enormous leverage, but can only move, you can only turn so slightly. We're kind of in that middle stage now, and so we're being a lot more responsible with the directions that we take compared to years ago.
Now getting back to funding, because I know you've raised different rounds. So what would be the biggest misconception people have about fundraising, the founders have about fundraising, and what would be your best advice for startups that, especially B2B marketplaces or others, about fundraising?
I think that the advice I would give is to raise as little as possible for as long as possible. And I don't think I'm the first person to give that advice, but I stand by it. And I think that optimizing for partner versus optimizing for capital has always been the better move for me personally. And so I've been very fortunate in my fundraising career to have multiple partners to choose from across different firms and geographies and skill sets. And we've always optimized for the people who understand our business the best. And yeah, I know you guys had Fabrice on this podcast not too long ago, who's one of our investors. He is, amongst many things, a true marketplace expert. And so you want to find people like that. We're so fortunate. We have such incredible investors from L. Catterton, who's the largest consumer private equity fund in the world, to USB, who is such an incredible thesis-driven investor, and we fit so squarely within their thesis of network effects that it's been so transformative for us to work with great folks like Eric and Rebecca and Rick Zulo from Equal and Simon Wu from Cafe and Nahal Mehta from ENIAC. Like, these are people who are partners to us, right? True partners. And I do think that that's the best value that we get from fundraising, aside from, far much more than just a capital.
But those are like light funds. Like, how do you track them, and how do you, like, as an early stage founder who, I don't know, like, what would be your advice to someone he's like his first or second company but doesn't have like a big track record to get a
Yeah, similarly, I think mentally thinking of it think of pitch for partners, not for funds, right? So nowadays with LinkedIn and every fund website has like a lot more content on it than it did 10 years ago. If you are a marketplace business, find the marketplace expert at that fund, right? And pitch that person. And if you are building an AI roll up for an antiquated industry, like, go look at the people who are putting money into that type of business and work backwards from there. And don't be afraid to get no's, because I'll tell you right now, we've raised over $100 million for Ghost. My Series A had a spreadsheet with 67 no's on it. Like, full pitch, no thank you, not interested. And it's just the nature of the game. And I do think that's like a really important thing to have, is just the resilience to know that you got to find the right people for you.
I know, Josh, we're running out of time. Do we have time for one more question, or okay, just so really quick? I know you mentioned like Fabrice Granda that we received on the podcast, and he mentioned something very interesting about the future of marketplace. Basically, he said that the future marketplace are the ones that are going to be tackling very niche problems in very niche industries. I wanted to to know if you agreed with that statement, and also where do you see the future of B2B marketplace headed in the future?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Honestly, Fabrice would be a better person to answer it than me, but I'll give you the college try. I think that for shopping, marketplaces are the future. So StockX and Goat and eBay and Poshmark and Depop and Etsy and whatnot is the future. It's just every traditional retailer is becoming a marketplace. Amazon is a marketplace. Walmart is a marketplace. Best Buy is a marketplace. Target is a marketplace. So I do think that because we have the infrastructure, right, to create a unified experience for a shopper with a backend that is fulfilled through endless nodes, I do believe that the marketplace model is here to stay. And I think the way that marketplaces evolve in the future is that they feel less and less like marketplaces, right? Even Uber, which is a marketplace, it doesn't feel like one because ultimately you're getting you as the demand are getting access to unified supply anywhere in the world that you are. And so I do think that that model is going to continue to trend where we will engage with more marketplaces without it feeling truly like a marketplace.
You think it's going to be towards, we're heading towards AI agents speaking to the AI agents with large action models can speak? Like you wouldn't be going to a marketplace, it would just be AI with AI. Just that would be the marketplace for AI, basically.
It's that's a question. I don't think I have the I don't have a good answer for you, but I do think that the alpha as humans right now, AI will not replace our jobs. Someone using AI will replace us, right? Like that's ultimately, I think the era that we're in is that the people, like even as engineers at our company, it's not that AI will replace them. It's that the best engineers that know how to utilize the AI tools to the highest capability will replace the engineers that don't have the AI experience.
Okay. On this note, thanks a lot, Josh, for your time and for your precious advice. It was a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. Maybe before we let you go, any last thing to say to our audience or to people who want to start something, maybe?
Yeah, I spoke at the Ivan in Young Academy at USC a little while ago, and I asked a question to the entire class, which was who here is planning on launching a company, and basically got 100% hands in the air, which was so cool to see. And I asked how many of those people have already started it, and I got 50%. And so my advice is that needs to be 100% too. There is no excuse with the tools that you have available to you and the access that everyone has not to immediately start that company and test it and learn and get advice and get early users and get feedback and just start running.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Josh. Thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, guys. This was amazing.
That's it for this episode of 0 to 1. If this gave you an idea, an edge, or the courage to build, send it to your friend, founder, or your team. Follow us, subscribe, and drop us a DM if there's someone you want to hear next. Until then, keep building, keep shipping, and go from 0 to 1.